Combing through BT23, another card that caught my attention was Etemon. While this Digimon is another card that can be played in a CS deck, exactly how much utility does it have in an Etemon and Sukamon deck? Today's deck profile videos answers that question because overall, this deck is insanely budget, and if you want to make things obnoxious for even some of the meta decks, look no further. BT23's sole new arrival for the deck is BT23 Etemon, a Digimon that can digivolve from a level 4 Digimon with Sukamon in its name, or the CS trait. It has Alliance and a main once per turn effect. You may play one play cost 3 or lower card with Chuumon or Sukamon in its name, or the CS trait from your hand without paying the cost. Then one of your level 3 or higher Digimon gains Reboot and Blocker until your opponent's turn ends. While it does have Alliance, its inheritable is also Alliance. This Digimon allows for a lot of defensive plays, considering you could play any level 4 Sukamon or level 3 Chuumon as a follow-up play on memory. While I haven't had too many matchups against Hoodymon, the theory behind this is that you can play out Digimon like platinumsukamon, which means if your opponent goes into Hoodymon by any means, they would DP reduce this Digimon out of existence, which means you get a D-Digivolve. But in looking over other content creators on YouTube, to see how other players have been tackling this archetype, this deck hasn't seen much content in the last year despite getting support sprinkled here and there. For example, did you know that black and yellow scrambles are especially effective in this type of deck? Depending on how you base the deck, scrambles are option cards that when used, reduce the Digivolution cost of their respective color to the same color by a cost of 3. And while these are basic for most decks, it's the delay effect that is especially effective in Sukamon decks. Start of your turn, if your opponent has a Digimon, and you don't, delay, return one of that color scrambled Digimon from your trash to the top of the deck. Then if you don't have a Digimon, you may play one of that color scrambles Digimon with 2000 DP or less from your trash without paying the cost. Keep in mind that the stipulation for this is only DP, not level, which means if your board is empty, you can utilize black or yellow scrambles to return your Sukamons in play, while also simultaneously adding a missing level 5 piece to the top of the deck to draw in 2. Additionally, when you look at some of the older bare basic combos, your EX5 Metal Etemon is a powerhouse in that when your opponent attacks, you can stack a card with Etemon or Sukamon in its name to the top of your security. Meaning with cards like Suka's Curse or Etemon, you can generate some additional board presence or more aggressive plays. And because of Suka's Curse, you can make your opponent's Digimon become Sukamon and are white. Meaning unless they were the black Digivolution text box, chances are they are kind of hosed in Digivolving. One reason why Suka's Curse is pivotal in some ways for this deck is because Hoodymon still might be able to Digivolve into CS trait Digimon for a cost of 3. But when it comes to DNA Digivolution into Chuumon, you must also meet the color requirements. Whether you're turning your opponent's Digimon into Sukamon via the option card, or kingsukamon, this is where this deck can really shine. But DIGI-PANDA, how are you playing Sukamon without Digivolving into it? Ultimately with the combos, this is where there's one particular card that I found very effective in this deck. Again, platinumsukamon. With so much removal, whether it be from DP reduction from decks like Hoodymon, or removal from bigger decks like Justmon and Red Purple Imperial Dramon, my thought behind this was what can I do to minimize the problems in the meta? While platinumsukamon does de-digivolve on deletion, the other problem is, what if my opponent simply wants to not just delete it and attack through instead? This is where the deck has been streamlined, with multiple ways to give blocker. Whether you're promoting up an Etemon and playing platinumsukamon for a cost of 1, and giving it Reboot and Blocker, or you're giving it blocker via Shoto Kazuma. But the reason why the blocker ends up being super important in this deck is also because of EX5 Chuumon. While this Digimon is an inheritable in the stack, if the Digimon is deleted on your opponent's turn, you can play the Chuumon back out via its own inheritable effect from the trash in order to reveal the top 3 cards of the deck. Here you may play one Digimon card with Sukamon in its name among them without paying the cost. Trash the rest. Keep in mind this card does not look for any specific level Digimon, it just has to have Sukamon in the name. Which means if you reveal 2 Sukamons and a kingsukamon, you can now play the kingsukamon and send the rest of the cards to the trash. At which point, if you have 3 or more cards of Sukamon in their name in the trash, you turn one of your opponent's Digimon into Sukamon being white with 3000 DP. And for some decks that need colors to Digivolve, you hose them again from climbing up the chain. Other cards like BT23 Chuumon can also be played, to play Suka's Curse to the top of security if that's what you're going for. But ultimately the deck is designed to control what your opponent has on board, converting them into Sukamons before potentially DP reducing them out of existence. Other cards can de-Digivolve, while others can redirect. But as fun as this deck was in testing, this deck went through so many changes, and there are a lot of considerations for you as a player to consider. Because of the varying degrees of Chuumon, you can either black base this deck or yellow base it. For early renditions of the deck, I started with Pagumon. However, because not all your cards are black, this is where it can be kind of funky when you miss the draw. Tokomon became another option, but only granted this draw 1 to the Digimon on your opponent's turn. But the real kicker and the ultimate deciding factor was BT16 Upamon. This Digimon provides blocker for my Digimon if it has 2 or more colors. Because of this, a large portion of the deck can now retain blocker and utilize your inheritables for a slew of shenanigans. But as always, figure out what works best for you based on your playstyle. This deck profile is only a starting point. For your Chuumons, you have a variety to select from. The immediate thing that you'll notice is that I'm not on any of the memory floodgates, and honestly it's very easy to remove them with a lot of the decks, and it's not worth it. Instead, I utilize 8 Chuumons that have the same inheritable where they play Chuumon from my trash, suspended if this Digimon was Sukamon or Etemon in name on deletion. One of these Chuumons gives me a reduction cost into my Sukamons by 1, while the other Chuumon has an on-play effect in which I reveal the top 3 cards, and play one Digimon with Sukamon in its name without paying the cost before trashing the rest. Again, simple. But the last Chuumon is the one from BT14, which on play adds the top security card, and then lets me place one card with Sukamon in its name from my hand to the top of the security stack, i.e. Security Sukamon, or my personal favorite, Suka's Curse. Largely, these are the Chuumons I enjoy tinkering with the most, but another option you could run is the one from BT13. The only downside to this Chuumon is that it only digivolves from a black level 2 Digimon, which means for a black base, this is another valid target. It also does play Chuumons as well from the trash, suspended on deletion without paying the cost, and can return your cards with Sukamon in their name from trash to hand by trashing a Sukamon or Etemon named card. Because of its lack of genericness for discarding, this is ultimately why I passed on this variant. For your Sukamons, there are quite a few to select from. Again, while I'm not on any of the BT3 variant, the reasoning for this is simply because the cards revealed go to the bottom, instead of the trash. It's pretty critical that cards get to the trash so I can trigger some of my other effects. But BT11, a definite 4 of considering it can add Chuumons, Sukamon, or Etemon named Digimon. PlatinumSukamon is the MVP for disrupting traditional stack builds, but I noticed in Royal Knight matchups, it's hella rough. The Security Sukamon can also set up another body for you, though its inheritable is only a DP reduction, which is hit or miss if your opponent has DP buffs. And the last option of course being targetmon, since it can recycle itself and also has blocker on its own. No other Sukamon has a function in this deck, which is ultimately why I passed on the DM variants. Level 5s of course, you're running the BT11 kingsukamon, because this card can transform your opponent's Digimon into Sukamon, and in particular cases where you build wide and have protection, you can check 3 or even 4 security in one go. I did add one BT13 kingsukamon because it's another Sukamon target. Etemon wise, I am on 4 copies of the newest Etemon for playing the Sukamons and Chuumons for 1 memory, but the last variant comes from BT14, in which when it's hit in security, you can play a level 6 Etemon named Digimon without paying the cost. While other players may run EX5 Etemon for taunting, if you do run this, then you're also running a more specialized top end with Blast Digivolution. This list does not, but you can go this route should you pursue it. As for the level 6s, the EX5 Metal Etemon is the king of all level 6s for this deck, because it is searchable and can utilize a lot of the various effects, whether it be Suka's Curse, Security Etemon, or Security Sukamon. Not only does it provide redirects, but it can also delete Digimon or Tamers based on its play cost, which further increases its value. But for the last option, I went with 1 copy of BT18 Metal Etemon because it can provide a security attack -2 and a D-Digivolve 1 on one of my opponent's Digimon when it's played, Digivolved, or even deleted. And considering you could have built wide with multiple kingsukamons or Etemons, you can also DNA into this hilariously. But why no King Etemon? My personal opinion on this card, it's too slow. Based on the current format, if you are pursuing Ace Digivolution as a potential option, this will also depend on what scrambles you're running. For example, if you're running Valkyriemon Ace, you'll want to run yellow scrambles instead of black scrambles, in which case you might be on a silly card like Metal Seedramon Ace, Black Wargreymon Ace, or even Darkdramon Ace. But if you're looking for ones that stay within color alignment, Shadow Seraphimon Ace is always a safe choice. Other testing that I looked into was seeing if I could turbo into Ruin mode as a means to combat certain decks out there. The downside? It wasn't consistent enough for me to continue exploring this as an option. You can definitely run it, but chances are, you're going to trash it. Option-wise, Suka's Curse is the ultimate disrespect for your opponent's Digimon, because until the end of your turn, if it's hit in your security, you change one of their Digimon into a white Digimon named Sukamon. This adds additional security checks for kingsukamon, but it also prevents them from digivolving unless the special black text box allows them to do so. And considering it's also being treated as being named Sukamon, it also counts towards the kingsukamon card. For my build, I prioritize black scramble over yellow scrambles despite a yellow base, because you can play back out platinumsukamons if it's hit in security, meaning if you can instantly de-digivolve on the delete, it's even more worth it. But for the final slots, tamer-wise, Shoto Kazuma adds additional means for giving blocker to my Digimon, while Tai can be additional card draw. And while yes, there is DP, the innate low DP of Sukamons is negligible for its use. Overall, this was a really fun deck to explore, and whether you decide to take it to an event, or play locally, I hope this deck profile was a starting point for you, and you've made improvements to it since. What are your thoughts on Sukamon, and do you think Etemon adds more to the deck? Let me know, because I'm going to keep exploring some of the one-off cards in BT23, Hacker's Slumber. This is DIGI-PANDA, logging out.